It's time for To The Last Drop podcast with Liam Delcalm and Brendan Nell.
Started. Okay. It's To The Last Drop. I'm Brendan Nell, and I'm here again with Liam Delcalm. And yeah, another week, another podcast. Liam, good evening or good afternoon, and welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we were just talking about how it doesn't stop. We just keep on trucking. I mean, that's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and with us today, we've got a very special guest all the way from New York, the owner of the Sharks, Marco Masotti. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Yeah,
Well, here in New York, rainy and snowy New York.
I think, Marco, just to kick us off, I mean, there's obviously been a lot going on with the Sharks and a lot of obviously a bit of disappointment with some of the results, as I'm sure you knew this question was probably going to come anyway. A lot of people have asked me sort of what do the owners think and about everything that's going on. So maybe let's open with that. What do you think of where the Sharks are right now?
Well, look, how much time do you have? Look, I think that we're obviously not happy with where we are. And you have to, and when it happens in sports, you have to look in the mirror and say, what could we have done differently? You have to question the people on the ground and question some of the decisions, that were made, and take a little bit of a deep dive into the organization. We are not where we expected to be after 2 to 3 years of investing in the franchise. So frankly, putting money into it, encouraging best practices, trying to build a media and entertainment business around rugby. So we're not where we wanted to be. But having said that, I will tell you, this is the first year, and it comes from coaching. Look, we were stuck with some decisions that were made earlier on, like the coaching structure that was put in place. And at that point, you're stuck into a contract and you're still learning a little, and you want to see how the team unfolds. But I really do believe in what Neil Powell brings from a sevens background, and how I expect rugby to evolve and the type of rugby you want to play. The experience of a John Plumtree who understands Durban, who understands the Sharks organizations, and some of the young people around them. So I do believe, and notwithstanding where we sit in the log, I do believe that the culture that's emerging is something that's very healthy and something to build on. And it just takes. I'm impatient. I'm sitting here, in New York. I try and get there as much as I can. I'm impatient, but I can see things that are happening that make me a lot more comfortable than was the case in year one.
I think people probably don't appreciate the magnitude of the task, because it's not just about what happens on the field. I mean, as you rightly pointed out earlier, there's also the business part of this, the developing of the brand. To what extent do you think the Sharks have sort of the people on the ground have grasped the task that faces them?
It's time for To The Last Drop podcast with Liam Delcalm and Brendan Nell.
They need help, and we've added some resources. I think maybe we're on a little bit of a different page. People on the ground in the rugby business in South Africa have a certain way of doing things. They do them a certain way, and bring in new ideas and bring in new ways of doing things is hard to do. And change is hard to do. And so, I didn't want to be, I represented, a group that went into the Chelsea soccer team, and I did that deal. And, they were American private equity fund, and, they really changed everything. They felt that, unless you do that, you never know, it's very hard to change people. You never know really what's going on the ground. And I decided I am South African. I am from Masotti. I didn't want to be too American, too much of an American private equity person. I like the way we're doing it. We have put more people on the ground who can, help with the vision. And now I have a personal relationship with the coaches on the ground. I think that was important. I didn't have that before. The South Africans are not used to the model of a controlling private owner of these types of businesses where there's got to be transparency and reporting and running judgments on things. But it's a very different model, and it's taken us a while to get used to it. I've done a lot of self-reflecting on it. I sat down with a very close friend who runs Harris Blitzer. They own like 16 soccer teams and an NFL team and an NBA team. And I asked them how they engage with their teams, and they do a weekly sports ops meeting. They do a weekly business ops meeting as owners. They don't, they use a lot of data analytics. They don't get into who the people are and, who runs onto the fields, but, they get into how do we do things? What best practices do we have? Have you thought about something different? And that's what we're working on. And I think we're finally getting there. And I think it's going to be very healthy for the franchise on and off the field.
Mark, maybe just for me, do you think maybe there was a case of with you guys coming in that maybe the Sharks shot too, aimed too high too quickly, if I can put it that way, instead of putting the groundwork in and the structures and all that. I mean, look, in South Africa, as you know, I mean, there's the idea that they went out and they bought these superstars like Etzebeth and Sia and all that, and that maybe have upset a bit of that culture in that team at that moment. So, do you think is that a fair statement, or do you think that's maybe a bit misguided?
No, look, I think it's a fair statement. There's not one, a rugby team. I mean, it's almost like an orchestra. Every part of it, when we came in, I was getting emails from Stormers fans about it's the worst Stormers team they've ever seen. Yeah. And the coaching structure is settled. It really does take time to get the orchestra right. And yes, when you bring in different pieces, it can upset the apple cart. But it's Eben Etzebeth, he was the one person I got into the phone with. I mean, he is fan. If you can't figure out how to make it work around the Eben Etzebeth, he drives culture and hard work and standards. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think it just takes time. And he's effectively just arrived, and Sia just so great for the franchise to be associated. Sia was part of, why we did that. I mean, I regard him as a business partner, but you're right. For the team at the time, it was probably disruptive. It was hard on Sean Everett is a very, very good technical coach, but some of these things, were almost, forced onto the local team and the coaches that were, set up around him. So it didn't look, it could have, that season we finished fifth in the log and then, lost in the quarters, and, it could have, with rugby, it's a little bit about, momentum and time. And so, look, we've made some good decisions. We've made some bad decisions. The whole franchise, what happens in South African rugby, everyone points in different directions, and there are lots of reasons for it. The fans don't deserve it. I don't deserve it, but I know that people are working very, very hard to turn it around. I know we've got really, really good players. We've got some young players who are very exciting, coming through. We've got some, experienced old hands who are very committed to the franchise. We're probably missing a few chess pieces, but I do believe with this coaching structure, we're going to get it right.
You also tied at the hip. All the franchises are tied at the hip with SA Rugby, so there needs to be a proper working relationship. In terms of, if you look at something like the size of squads and the demands placed on players, the number of games that they can play a season. Are you on the same page with SA Rugby? I mean, are there tweaks, or are there things that you would want to change on that front?
No, I'm not on the same page with SA Rugby. Firstly, let me just say a few things about that. I mean, SA Rugby, look, we all have to take our hats off. I mean, it is incredible what SA Rugby has achieved over the last 2 World Cups. And you have to give a lot of credit where it's due. It is incredible what the Springboks have achieved, what the Springbok brand has achieved, what the business around the Springboks has achieved, how it's piercing all parts of South African communities. It is enormously impressive. What the coaches have achieved. I mean, we have coaches, who really, thinking out of the box and really, thinking about rugby in a different way. And we're outsmarting other teams. And I just think it's incredibly impressive. But it's coming at the expense of the clubs. And we don't need it to. We need a structure that's built on, I call it partnership and alignment. I have to be incentivized to help SA Rugby, and they have to be incentivized to help me. I should just get a percentage, of the proceeds. We should have a deal on player availability. There are lots of ways we can collaborate. In the NFL, it is all about the NFL. The teams and the NFL, they collaborate more than they compete. And we just have to, it's a relationship. I think we'll get it right. We just have to keep working hard at it. But we need to go back to the drawing board on what the right model is for the major franchises, because it is no doubt about it. It's cost me money. Okay. I paid for 8 players to be at the World Cup and unavailable to the Sharks. We were paying the comp. We got small pony contributions, but in no way was it enough, for the lost revenue that was the result of them there. So I'm financing SA Rugby. It's not the other way around. I'm financing, and 2 of our players, marquee players, I mean, it's impacted our seasons, have been injured, and we're still paying the comp. It is my joy to do it when we lift a trophy. And I'm happy to be doing it, but it's coming at the expense of the franchises. And, it's a very short-term way of thinking. We need really strong local teams, for the good of the game in South Africa.
You obviously have to operate under certain constraints in terms of squad sizes. If you think of this season and maybe next season, what would be the ideal? I mean, if you have a blank slate, I mean, how many players would you be able to, not be able to, but would you like to contract?
Way more. Okay, if it's 53 now, way more. And because at the end of the day, the real asset of South African rugby are the best players. That's what I'm effectively buying into, the best talent pool in the world. And if my whole idea and dream is you can't, as a South African rugby franchise, do it on your own. And there are going to be a few transformational events for rugby. One of them is the 2030 One World Cup in the United States and the development of a Super League in Europe. Okay, and so we can't do it on our own. And so we have to, it's what Harris Blitzer does, what Man City does. We have to create player paths through collaborations. If I can contract, 75 players and make them part of the Sharks family, even when they're playing at Old Glory in the United States, even when they're playing at Saracens, even when they're playing at Narbonne, the 2nd division of the French league, I've got an asset that I can market. I can keep them within the Sharks family. I can grow our brand. I can develop players who are not getting enough playing time, develop players who need a life experience in other jurisdictions without losing them. I think rugby players need, I keep on saying to the guys on the ground, that they need something to come back to. The idea of going to play, 2 years in Bath, 1 year in France, 1 year in Japan. You still, are you making meaningful money to last your whole lifetime? You have to have something to come back to. You have to have a franchise. When you walk in the building, there's a statue of you. If you have adversity in your life, there's a community who can help you. If you need a family to come back to, and I don't think you can create that family just on your own in the realities of today's world, but you can through creating player paths and collaborations. At the end of the day, this is a human capital intensive business, and the Sharks will be most successful when we really, really take care of the human capital, even if that means we have to, as part of their growth and development, have them play outside of the country briefly.
Marco, I mean, I hear what you say. I mean, part of it is as well. I mean, part of the problem is the global game at the moment. I mean, I hear what you say about SA Rugby and that, but I think with the Rugby Championship sitting where it is in the calendar, the tours sitting where they are in the calendar. I mean, it's not sustainable for anybody in South Africa. The players play 12-month seasons. There's no preseason anymore. So those things have to change as well, and would obviously make that whole relationship a lot easier between the clubs and SA Rugby. The other thing I thought I'd maybe get your point of view on as well. I mean, if rugby's to evolve as well, I mean, the other thing I always find quite strange is that rugby doesn't have, like football, a transfer system where, I mean, you guys can contract 75 guys then, and the guy wants to leave and another club wants him, then you make some money off that.
Yeah. It doesn't, but yes, we should be able to. and we have. We have made a little bit of money. Look, I would like, more players, longer contracts, because at the end of the day, that is a massive asset of South African rugby. And so, look, you'll see a little bit of it. There are, it's obviously not the same transfer system of other sporting codes, but there have been a few isolated and increasing examples of transfer fees.
Yeah.
If you talk transfer fees, it's one of those things where you kind of need the entire ecosystem to move along with it. I mean, do you think it's something that that you can broker, that's something that you can make happen in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Yes, and it really moves the needle for South African clubs. Getting a euro, a euro transfer fee. The currency. The currency is very compelling. The European currency, very compelling. For us to be there, a lot of those clubs are looking for the talent, and we here on the ground, and so I think you'll see more examples of it.
Mark, you mentioned the 2031 World Cup. I was just thinking as well. I know you guys are quite ambitious in terms of your plans to turn the Sharks into a global brand. Are we going to see, and I know there's probably not much time left in the calendar where you can organize these sort of exhibition games and things like that, but are we going to see the Sharks maybe playing in some exotic places in the US?
Absolutely. That's the plan. And we have a guy on the ground now in Durban. He's just coming for a 3-month stint. He lives in New Jersey. We're not going to, look, we are a global brand. The Sharks are the top brand in South Africa, notwithstanding where we're sitting on the log. And there's a lot of, and there, by the way, there is only one Sharks. I mean, it drove me crazy when you guys were calling Sale the Sharks. When they were playing, you have no idea how much it drove me crazy. But it comes from the 2000s, massive brand in Australia, New Zealand, in Europe. Sharks fans are everywhere. Massive following in the UK. So, we're a global brand, but we want the American market to understand. And look, as I said, we will be here. We could do it in collaboration with the Saracens, for example, who want to be here as well. It wouldn't surprise me if you see a URC game played here. You could play a Munster or Leinster, where they've got massive following here. which is what the English Premiership have done in the past as a way of. So in the lead up to the Rugby World Cup, as the game is being promoted more, I think you see. But we want the Sharks as part of that, and you have to dream big for your hometown team.
Yeah,
we're here. There's no reason why we can't.
No, exactly.
And there's a lot of rugby here. It's very connected. It's very connected to a little bit military culture here. So at places like West Point, there's a lot of rugby here. Our relationship is with Old Glory in Washington, D.C. I think you have to be on the East Coast of the country. The owners there have become, good friends. The Beast played for Old Glory when he was here. And so, again, creating player pathways, we want really strong relationships, for when that happens. But you will see Sharks coming through. And, I'd like a few of the guys to even go spend some time. One of my clients owns the Washington Commanders. They recently purchased it. Go and spend a week. See how the players train and condition, have the coaches spend time with their coaches. There's, that's a sport that's a cousin of ours. I mean, I'm a massive fan of it. And it creates another possibility for getting our sport out there a little.
If you try to get sort of brand awareness around the Sharks in the States, then surely they should, at some point, if you take things to its natural conclusion, be involved in some form of formal combat on that continent. Do you foresee that happening?
Yeah, you mean formal combat as in playing?
As in playing,
other... yeah.
As in a proper
not, I'm getting the drinkers fight on Saturday, so that's a different... yes, no, I could foresee them playing against one of the MLS clubs, MLS All-Star. There are a few... We're really, really struggling, as Brendan said, with the season. But there are a few people here trying to do what soccer did. So you create a little bit of a preseason competition. Now, it's not helpful to our brand because it's probably at a time of year when you're without your Springboks. But I think it's still a great idea. You're creating opportunities for young players. So what you could do is you could have you could have the Brumbies here, you could have Saracens, you could have the Sharks, you could have I'd like to see the Stormers here as well. I'm close friends with one of their new co-owners. And you could see some of the MLS teams. You do like a small preseason thing, and it's amazing. So for us, in the URC, Ireland is a 6-hour flight from New York. Yeah. You could do a week or two of preseason here, and then kick off your URC campaign in Europe.
You mentioned the Stormers, Mark. I have to ask. I mean, given the fact that they've finally gone through that and they finally got the equity deal done, was there not a tinge of perhaps looking back and thinking, geez, if they could have only done that 3 years earlier? I know you had we spoke a lot at that time, very rough negotiations at that time with the then management of who are now obviously gone. But do you ever think back and wonder, especially where the Stormers ended?
Yeah, well, is their deal done? I think they've ended in the right place. No, I don't feel like that at all. I mean, I'm so invested in the Sharks. My mom and my sister go to the games. I lost my dad 3 years ago. We created a suite with photos of him everywhere. It's been so wonderful for me personally. I think Durban needs a lot of help. The local community need the Shark. I just want I want us to be winning, and I want the business to get to the next level of its growth. I love the Stormers. I do realize in retrospect that it's just a much harder deal. It'll be way more expensive. It's just you won't. These types of deals, you really have. I mean, it's hard enough at the Sharks. You really, as a controlling owner, I've given them some advice. You really need to exercise control to get things done. It's just a harder deal. It's a harder fan base. So I think, and they have the right group of people there. Stormers fans through and through, major business people, and I think we can. as I said, you have to collaborate. You have to make it about the sport of rugby in South Africa, and you have to collaborate more than you compete. And I think now I think there were a few, conditions to the deal. I think they're almost there. I think we now have, I mean, if you take a step back compared to some of the European clubs, I mean, we've got great ownership groups at South African franchises. We have, two of the top business people in South Africa at the Bulls. We have this great consortium, joint ventures / ownership group at the Stormers. We've got us at the Sharks, including some owners of other types of sports. A great group of local business people that tap into lots of different types of businesses in South Africa. I mean, these are people around the game who can create real opportunities for players while they're playing, and if we just get it right, right now our Springbok coach is helping Irish rugby at Leinster, and we have players going there. If we can have great clubs in South Africa, with the
Mark,
types
you mentioned at the start. Sorry, you mentioned at the start of the interview that that you're impatient. You want things to move in the right direction. Have you had to reset your objectives for the Sharks in terms of trophies, if I can put it that way, for the next season or two? I mean, what is the piece of silverware that you would be happy with in the next year or two?
For me, it's all about the top competition. I mean, that's why Springboks are there. You want to win for your brand, the top competition that is available to clubs. And so it's the Heineken, well, it's not the Heineken, but it's the Heineken Cup. Investec Cup. That has to be your goal as a club that has the most exposure. So that is the goal. The South African teams are building to it. I think, and I think, what the Bulls are doing is, very thoughtful. They've got a World Cup winning coach. You have to respect what they're achieving. What the Stormers have already won the URC, but I think until we get everything right with SA Rugby, the clubs are still developmental clubs for the game more broadly, and so the focus is on the URC. I think Currie Cup becomes, for young guys. URC is still developmental, but if we really want to get to the next level, we have to win the Investec, and the only way you do that is with the best players in the world.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yeah. Is it possible with? Sorry, you go, Brendan.
Sorry, Liam. I was going to say, just on that point, though, I mean, how much does it hurt you then, that given where the team is now, it looks unlikely that through the URC at least they'll qualify. They've obviously still got a chance through the Challenge Cup if they win that to qualify for the Champions Cup. But I mean, that must be the first goal, and I think that probably would be a disappointment if you guys don't get there by the end of the season.
It's going to be a disappointment season after season if we don't get there. You have to have something that's now. I know the realities of, as I said, I described as an orchestra. Okay, is it going to be next thing? I think we need to give our coaches and players time together. I mean, we're halfway through the Euro season. Our head coach is just really getting to know the players. That's the reality. You have to look at where you're at 18 months. You have to look at, the coaches tell me that's sort of a threshold. That's sort of a threshold time. You have to look at where you are at 3 years. I really, really believe in the people on the rugby side of things. As I said, we'll need a few more chess pieces along the way, but they have a plan now. And I think it's very thoughtful. And so when I speak to them, I was in Durban recently, we sit down and we go through the plan. You have to, if you have a goal, you have to have a plan. So, I think it would take a lot, was probably like the Springboks winning the World Cup in 2019. I think, the coaches were aiming probably for the last World Cup. I think it'll take something extraordinary, to win it, but it's going to take, and I'm just for all of the South African franchises, the availability of our internationals. for the
Marco,
knockouts.
my last question is a little offbeat. When you watch rugby now, do you watch it differently?
I absolutely do. I mean, I will tell you, because of this season, I haven't been enjoying it as much, and I've learned a lot. I've got so much passion for the sport and some of the players, and I can see what they've been going through. So it hasn't been as enjoyable, but I know I will start enjoying it again. When I see some of the hard work transferring into, success on the field. And I want success off the field too, for the fans. There's so much we can be doing. It's really changing the mentality. It is not a rugby business. It is a media and content entertainment business. And you have to, the product we're selling, the major product we're selling is rugby, but it requires thinking about it different, and we can all get it right.
The last one from me, Marco, is this podcast is also a bit offbeat. Is also it's rugby and wine we normally do. So we normally open a bottle. So I mean, you sit in New York. How much South African wine do you get there, and what do you enjoy watching the Sharks with?
Well, it's taken a lot of alcohol this season. I am a wine drinker. I must confess, because I live in Midtown, and I have an apartment in Midtown just above the Museum of Modern Art. I'm on the 28th floor, and Vincent May, who's my co-controlling owner of the Sharks, has an apartment on the 36th floor. And I'm generally around in Manhattan, go out every night, and love South African wine. So one of South Africa's winemakers, Ken Forrester, his daughter Vicky is one of the young partners in my group at Pauwai. So I'll do a plug for the Ken Forrester wines. So it's generally that, but I like a good South African red.
Yeah.
It's hard because the games here, when I'm at least in New York, and I'll try and go to the ones in Europe. So the game over the weekend was at 8 a.m. Right,
Well,
so
you can still do wine.
It's not like I'm opening a bottle of wine.
Well, they say mimosas with champagne or something like that.
Yeah.
So you don't find yourself hopping on a plane for a weekend, go to the Napa Valley, and come back with a couple of boxes?
No. That's almost like going to Europe. But I'd rather go to Ireland, or Scotland, and have a whiskey.
Yeah, I was going to say Ken Forrester is also involved with the Sharks, isn't he? Isn't he the wine supplier? Or he's somewhere involved with the Sharks?
He's the controlling owner of Saracens is Dominic Sylvester. Is a very good friend. Him and Ken are very close friends, and so you'll find a few Forrester bottles of wine on the ground at the Sharks around holiday time, and it's often Dominic giving everyone gifts. And he's wonderful, a wonderful rugby person. We've just got some great investors in the franchise. We just need to unleash them a little when we get things right on the ground.
I must say I've had a couple of Ken Forrester ones. They've never disappointed, so I'm sure you have as well, Liam.
Yeah.
In your case, you can't see the wood for the trees afterwards, can you?
Margaret, thanks for joining us. This has been great. We could have probably filled 2 hours with this discussion, but we'll get you on some time again, and hopefully then we'll have a lot more good stuff to talk about the Sharks then as well.
No, and happy. We want to hear from you guys on the ground. You're speaking to everyone. We also learn a lot from you. So it's always a pleasure speaking to you. So thank you.
Thanks, Marco.
Thanks, Marco. Great stuff. Cheers.
Thanks for listening, and a reminder, you can find all the To The Last Drop podcasts on the Brendan Nell YouTube channel, iono.fm, Spotify, Player.fm, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.